Born in 1722, Samuel Adams was from the beginning set to live a life that would leave behind a legacy. His family stood out from the rest as they discussed political matters at the table and happily brought in his opinion, something that was not very common at the time. This led to Adams growing up to be a man of strong beliefs and with no hesitation in sharing it. From the Stamp Act to the Sons of Liberty to the Boston Tea Party, Samuel Adams played an essential role in forming what America was to be. His opposition to the British government served as a stepping stone to create a more independent America. Having been brought up in a family encouraged open-mindedness and speech, he discovered within himself a strong passion for politics that came in strong during a time when America was still divided in 13 colonies under the British rule. During a time in which many American businessmen were interested in keeping close ties to Britain, Adams stood out as being one of those that were strongly against it. He felt as if the British were suffocating the Americans and preventing their growth as a unified country. The Stamp Act was the breaking point that stirred in Adams a passion for political activism. Having been passed in 1765, the Stamp Act was a single act passed by the British government that requires stamp to be purchased and placed on all legal documents and printed material. The purpose of the act was to help England pay off their debt from the previously failed war as well as support the British Army. Adams felt as if these taxes were a form of taxation without representation, as the British government was not as present as they felt was needed for a governing body to be able to impose taxes on its people. The Continental Congress, the first governing body established in America, was given its first chance to oppose British rule. The British government kept taxing the colonies even though they had no representation in the British Parliament. As a member of the Continental Congress, he joined their effort in creating the Stamp Act Congress in 1765, which sole purpose was to repeal the Stamp Act. Around the same time, Adams created the Sons of Liberty, an organization focused solely on protecting the rights of the colonists and to fight taxation by the British government. The Stamp Act was successfully repealed thanks to the Stamp Act Congress in 1766. As a result of this, the British created the Townshend Acts, yet another attempt at taxing the American colonists in an effort to fund the British Army as well as pay off their debt. The Townshend Acts further pushed the American colonists against the British, and as tension increased, so did America's yearn for freedom, for liberty.
Following the tensions from both the Stamp Act as well as the Townshend Acts, and a strong resistance of British policy, the Sons of Liberty, led by Samuel Adams, were acclaimed for orchestrating one of the most renowned acts of rebellion on behalf of the American colonies in the name of freedom, the Boston Tea Party. This event was also a result of the Tea Act from 1773, a British attempt at boosting the sales of the East India Company, which granted the company a monopoly over the tea imported to the colonies. As an act of rebellion, Adams and the Sons of Liberty, dressed up as Mohawk Indians, boarded ships in the Boston harbor and threw into the ocean 342 chests of tea. Britain, outraged by this act, passed the Intolerable Acts, also known as the Coercive Acts, in 1774. With effects on all the colonials, this angered everybody, even those previously that were in favor of British rule. The Coercive Acts consisted of the Boston Port Act, the Massachusetts Government Act, the Administration of Justice Act, and the Quartering Act, as well as the Quebec Act. The idea behind the Coercive Acts was to make the colonies revolt against each other, as the British hoped they would blame Massachusetts for the Boston Tea Party, which at the time was the center of resistance to the British government. Instead, the Intolerable Acts led to a stronger union between the 13 colonies, which ultimately led to the creation of the First Continental Congress, which met on September 4, 1774 in Philadelphia. The Congress was composed by delegates from each of the 13 colonies and was established for the purpose of organizing colonial resistance against the Coercive Acts, as well as British Parliament. Samuel Adams was a part of the Continental Congress from 1774 to 1781 and represented his home state of Massachusetts. Samuel Adams was not for the Constitution, as he feared that too strong of a central government would infringe on the right to freedom of the people. As once stated by himself in 1774, "The country shall be independent, and we will be satisfied with nothing short of it." Samuel Adams was initially against the Constitution and was known as an anti-federalist who opposed the ratification of the Constitution, but eventually changed his mind because he was promised by Federalists that there would be a series of future amendments that would align with his beliefs. One of these was said to be the Bill of Rights. Samuel Adams shows us that if you have a passion for something, you should always speak your mind and vigorously fight for the morals you believe in. As Americans, and as students, we are instilled with morals that relate to liberty and to freedom. And we fight for these ideals every day, and we should strive for them. We can thank Samuel Adams for everything that he did, and we can only wish that during problematic times we have a leader like Samuel Adams.